She didn't break into the Pentagon. She didn't steal a badge. She didn't sneak past guards or bypass alarms. She already belonged there. On the morning of September 21, 2001, Ana Montes walked into her office at Balling Air Force Base like she had done thousands of times before. Same badge, same routine, same calm expression. Around her, the United States intelligence community was still reeling from the shock of the worst attack on American soil in modern history. Smoke had barely cleared from the Pentagon. War planning was accelerating by the hour. And no one in that building suspected that one of the most dangerous penetrations in U.S. intelligence history was already seated at her desk. For 16 years, Ana Montes had lived a double life inside America's defense apparatus, not as a rogue hacker, not as a disgruntled employee, but as a senior analyst, trusted, promoted, decorated, and consulted during national emergencies. She wasn't hiding on the margins of the system, she was embedded at its core. And that is what made her so effective.
This story is not about clever technology or dramatic stings. It is about how a modern intelligence system failed to recognize the danger already inside it. A system layered with clearances, polygraphs, audits, and counterintelligence safeguards, and still dismantled from within by someone who believed, absolutely and unshakably, that they were right. Ana Montes was never in it for money. She was never coerced. She never acted out of desperation. She acted out of conviction. To understand how she survived for 16 years, you first have to understand her environment. The Pentagon is not a single entity. It is a vast ecosystem of analysts, officers, technicians, and administrators, all compartmentalized, all vetted, all trusted just enough to do their jobs. The Defense Intelligence Agency, created in 1961, sits at the center of that ecosystem, producing assessments that shape military strategy, diplomatic posture, and covert operations around the world. Its analysts are not foot soldiers. They are interpreters of reality. Their judgments influence decisions that move fleets, deploy troops, and shift national priorities. And Ana Montes was one of the best among them.
Colleagues saw her as disciplined, intelligent, and intensely focused. She didn't socialize much. She didn't gossip. She didn't chase attention. In a culture where discretion is currency, she seemed perfectly suited to the job. Reliable, predictable, professional. Which is why no one noticed what she wasn't doing. She didn't talk about her personal life. She didn't take classified work home. She didn't access classified systems carelessly. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She followed the rules just closely enough to never trigger suspicion. From the outside, the system looked airtight. Background checks examined family ties, finances, and foreign contacts. Polygraph exams screened for deception. Access controls limited who could see what. Random audits tracked document handling. Counterintelligence officers monitored behavioral anomalies. But every safeguard rested on one fragile assumption: that loyalty, once verified, remained static.
The reality was far messier. Thousands of cleared personnel, thousands of potential points of failure, not because they were criminals or traitors in waiting, but because they were human, susceptible to ideology, to moral certainty, to the belief that serving a higher cause justified breaking a lower law. Ana Montes understood this instinctively, and so did the people who recruited her. By the time she joined the Defense Intelligence Agency in the mid-1980s, she had already made her choice, not in a moment of crisis, not under pressure, but quietly, deliberately, years earlier. She didn't see herself as betraying the United States. She saw herself as correcting it. That belief would carry her through decades of deception, through classified briefings, emergency task forces, and policy shaping reports. It would allow her to pass polygraph exams, sit across from counterintelligence officers, and sleep at night knowing that secrets entrusted to her were being transmitted to a foreign power. For 16 years, no alarms sounded.
No arrests were made. No suspicions reached critical mass. No investigations closed in. And that raises the question that will haunt every part of this story. How does someone penetrate the heart of American military intelligence without ever needing to break in? The answer begins long before the Pentagon, long before security clearances, long before shortwave radios and encrypted disks. It begins with a belief so strong that it can masquerade as loyalty and a system that was never designed to detect it. And that is where this story truly starts. Ana Montes did not look like a spy. She didn't come from the margins of American society. She wasn't struggling financially. She didn't drift toward extremism and isolation. In fact, her life followed a trajectory that background investigators are trained to trust. She was born in 1957 at a U.S. Army hospital in Nuremberg, West Germany, literally into the infrastructure of American power. Her father was a military physician. Discipline, service, and institutional loyalty were not abstract concepts in her household. They were daily realities.
Her family would later reinforce that image even further. Her sister, Lucy, became an FBI language analyst. Her brother, Tito, joined the FBI as a special agent. From the outside, the Montes family appeared almost archetypal, educated, patriotic, embedded within the very agencies responsible for protecting the nation. If counterintelligence officers were ever asked to imagine a household least likely to produce a mole, this would have been it. Anna herself excelled academically. She was quiet, analytical, and serious-minded. She spoke fluent Spanish, inherited from her Puerto Rican grandparents, a skill that would later elevate her professional value. Professors described her as sharp, focused, and ideologically engaged. Not radical, not disruptive, engaged. By the early 1980s, she had earned admission to one of the most prestigious pipelines into American foreign policy, the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. SAIS was not just an academic institution, it was a grooming ground, a place where future analysts, diplomats, and intelligence officers learned to think in terms of power, interests, and global influence.
It was also where Ana Montes began to crystallize a worldview that would define the rest of her life. The early 1980s were a volatile period in U.S. foreign policy, particularly in Central America. The Reagan administration supported anti-communist forces across the region, including the Contras in Nicaragua. To many Americans, this was a strategic necessity in the Cold War. To Ana Montes, it was something else entirely. She saw imperialism. She saw intervention masquerading as defense. She saw suffering justified by ideology she did not share. In seminars and informal discussions, she spoke openly against U.S. actions in Latin America. Her critiques were not reckless. They were not emotional. They were grounded in history and framed as moral objections, not partisan attacks. In an academic environment that prized debate, her views were tolerated, even respected. No one saw them as dangerous.
That is precisely why they were. Because intelligence recruitment does not begin with secrets, it begins with alignment. Somewhere within that academic world, Ana Montes caught the attention of someone who was listening very carefully. A fellow student, an activist, a political sympathizer. On the surface, nothing about the interaction appeared unusual. Graduate students debated foreign policy constantly, but this conversation had a purpose. It was an assessment. Cuban intelligence did not rush her. They did not ask her to betray her country. They waited. They did not speak of espionage.
Instead, they explored her convictions, her consistency, her willingness to act on belief rather than merely discuss it. The first task was almost trivial. She was asked to translate Spanish-language news articles about Nicaragua into English. The framing was benign, helping people understand what was happening on the ground, supporting a cause she already believed in. She agreed without hesitation.
What she didn't realize, at least not fully, was that this was the test. The translation itself was irrelevant. What mattered was her reliability, discretion, and willingness to contribute quietly without recognition or reward. She passed. Over time, the meetings continued. The faces changed. The language shifted subtly. Activists gave way to operatives. Ideology became operational. And eventually, in a controlled, deliberate progression, the question was asked directly. Would she be willing to help Cuba? Not financially, not symbolically, but practically. Would she provide information that could counter U.S. policy in Latin America? Ana Montes did not hesitate. To her, this was not treason, it was resistance, a moral correction to what she believed was an unjust system. Cuban intelligence understood exactly what they were dealing with. An agent motivated by money can be bought twice. An agent motivated by fear can break. But an agent motivated by ideology is stable, predictable, loyal to the cause, and far more dangerous. They did not demand immediate results. Instead, they gave her instructions that revealed the long game. If she was to be useful, she needed access.
That meant embedding herself inside the very institutions she opposed, applying for positions that required security clearances, passing vetting, becoming trusted. In other words, becoming invisible.
When Ana Montes applied to the Defense Intelligence Agency in 1985, nothing in her file raised alarms. Her education was elite. Her language skills were valuable. Her background checks returned clean. Her political views, while critical of U.S. policy, fell within acceptable bounds for academic discourse. She passed her polygraph. Whether through luck, training, or psychological discipline, the machine registered nothing unusual. Within months, Cuban intelligence had achieved what most hostile services could only dream of. They had placed a committed, ideologically driven agent inside one of America's most sensitive intelligence organizations. And Ana Montes had taken the first step into a double life that would last nearly 2 decades. She had not deceived the system by hiding who she was. She had deceived it by being exactly who it expected to see. In the next phase of this story, we will see how she operated once inside the Pentagon, and why her methods were so effective that for years, no one even thought to look for her. Because the most successful spies don't act suspicious, they act indispensable. Most spies are taught tradecraft before they are given purpose.
Ana Montes was the opposite. By the time she entered the Defense Intelligence Agency, her purpose was already fixed. What Cuban intelligence provided her was not motivation, but structure. They did not need to convince her why she was doing this. They only needed to show her how to survive while doing it. And survival was everything. From the beginning, her handlers emphasized a single principle: never behave like a spy. No dead drops in public parks, no dramatic exchanges, no risky meetings. Every unnecessary action increased the chance of detection. The safest spy was the one who generated no patterns.
So Ana Montes learned to become still. She avoided writing things down. She trained her memory to absorb and retain classified material without taking notes. She did not carry documents out of secure areas. She did not download files. She did not copy disks at work. Everything she passed to Cuban intelligence existed first, and often only, in her head. At home, she used a shortwave radio to receive encrypted broadcasts from Havana, sequences of numbers transmitted over the air, meaningless to anyone else, but precise to someone trained to decode them. Instructions, schedules, confirmation that messages had been received. To an outsider, it looked outdated. To counterintelligence professionals, it was nearly perfect. No electronic trail, no phone records, no emails, no physical exchanges. Even if someone suspected her, there would be nothing to find. Her communication with handlers was deliberately minimal. She did not ask questions unless necessary. She did not seek reassurance. Cuban intelligence recognized the value of her discipline and rewarded it with autonomy. The less she interacted, the safer she was.
And she was safe because she understood the system she was exploiting. Inside the DIA, analysts are encouraged to be curious, to seek information across compartments when it supports a broader assessment. That curiosity is not a flaw. It is essential to good intelligence work. Ana Montes weaponized it. She requested briefings beyond her immediate portfolio. She asked for documents that expanded her situational awareness. She attended meetings where Cuba was only a peripheral topic. Each request could be justified professionally. Each access was logged, but none appeared anomalous in isolation. She was not stealing information. She was collecting context, and context was far more dangerous.
Over time, that context became devastating. She learned how the United States assessed Cuban military capability, how it monitored communications, which intelligence streams were considered reliable and which were discounted. She understood not just what America knew, but how it knew it and where its blind spots were. And she shared that understanding. The intelligence she provided to Havana was not raw data dumped in bulk. It was curated, interpreted, explained. She told Cuban intelligence how to avoid surveillance, how to alter communications practices, how to recognize when American collection efforts were shifting. One of the most damaging disclosures involved a highly classified U.S. reconnaissance satellite. Its existence alone was a secret, its capabilities even more so. Once Havana understood it was being watched from space, it adjusted its behavior. Expensive technology, developed over years at enormous cost, was suddenly far less effective. But perhaps more catastrophic was what she revealed about people. Ana Montes provided the identities of approximately 450 American intelligence personnel working on Latin American issues.
Among them were undercover officers operating in Cuba itself. These were individuals whose safety depended entirely on remaining unknown. Cuban counterintelligence did not arrest them. That decision was not mercy, it was strategy. By allowing exposed officers to continue operating, Havana could feed them controlled information, observe American priorities, study how intelligence requests evolved. Montes had not simply compromised operations, she had turned them into tools. What made her uniquely dangerous, however, was not just what she passed outward, but what she shaped inward. As she rose within the DIA, she became the agency's senior Cuba analyst. Her assessments influenced reports read by policymakers, military planners, and senior officials. In 1997, she contributed to an evaluation concluding that Cuba posed minimal threat to the United States following the collapse of the Soviet Union. On its face, the analysis appeared reasonable. Cuba was economically strained, militarily diminished, no longer backed by Moscow. But the fact that such judgments were shaped by someone secretly aligned with Havana introduced a chilling possibility. The intelligence system had not just been penetrated, it had been guided. Whether Ana Montes deliberately skewed her analysis or simply wrote what she genuinely believed remains a matter of debate. In practice, the distinction may not matter. The result was the same. Policy decisions influenced by assessments that were, at minimum, compromised by conflicted loyalty. For years, no one questioned her. She received commendations. She earned a certificate of distinction for exceptional performance.
Colleagues referred to her as the Queen of Cuba. Her reputation grew alongside her access. And still, no alarm sounded. Because ideology, when perfectly aligned, leaves no fingerprints. There was no greed to detect, no fear to exploit, no emotional instability to observe. Only discipline. Only belief.
And belief, when wielded carefully, can be the most effective weapon of all. But even the most disciplined operation eventually encounters friction, not through technology or data, but through something far less predictable: human instinct. And in the next part of this story, we will see how a handful of small, easily dismissed moments began to crack the illusion of perfection Ana Montes had built, and why it took nearly a decade for anyone to act on them. Because sometimes the first sign of betrayal is not evidence. It's a feeling. The first warning signs did not arrive in the form of intercepted messages or forensic discoveries. They arrived as unease. By the mid-1990s, Ana Montes had been inside the Defense Intelligence Agency for more than a decade. Her reputation was firmly established. She was no longer just an analyst. She was the analyst on Cuba. When crises flared in the Caribbean, her phone rang. When briefings were needed on short notice, her name was on the list. That level of trust created insulation. People expect anomalies from junior staff. They rarely question senior experts. But one person did.
In early 1996, Rich Brown, a counterintelligence analyst at the DIA, began to notice things that did not fit. Not enough to accuse, not enough to escalate, just enough to bother him. Montez's behavior was subtle, almost invisible, but patterns emerge when someone pays attention long enough. The first incident seemed trivial.
In February 1996, during the Brothers to the Rescue crisis, Cuban military aircraft shot down 2 civilian planes flown by anti-Castro exiles. The event triggered an immediate intelligence response. Analysts were summoned. Protocols were tightened. No one left until cleared. Ana Montes took a phone call. Then she left the building, hours before she was supposed to. To most people, this would have meant nothing: stress, fatigue, a misunderstanding. But to Brown, it felt wrong. Montes was known for discipline, for procedure, for following rules precisely. This departure was out of character. He began to replay other moments in his mind. Montes had been unusually assertive in accessing classified information outside her direct assignments. She inserted herself into meetings involving Cuban counterintelligence matters where she had no formal role. She requested documents that expanded far beyond her stated analytical needs. None of it violated policy. All of it created proximity. Even more troubling, some of the Cuban intelligence sources that had once provided useful reporting had gone silent, not gradually, abruptly, as if they had been warned.
Brown could not prove a connection, but the timing unsettled him. There was also her tone. Ana Montes did not merely analyze U.S. policy toward Cuba, she opposed it. In meetings, her critiques crossed the line from detached assessment into advocacy. She argued for normalization, for lifting the embargo, for rethinking the American posture toward Havana. Disagreement was not unusual inside intelligence circles, but her certainty was. Analysts are trained to hedge, to qualify, to present alternatives. Montes spoke with conviction that left little room for doubt. Individually, each concern meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern.
Brown contacted Scott Carmichael, a counterintelligence officer specializing in mole investigations. Carmichael listened carefully. He had heard similar stories before. Most ended nowhere, but he agreed the pattern warranted attention. They approached the FBI. The response was cautious. Without concrete evidence, no intercepted communications, no suspicious financial activity, no foreign contacts. There was little appetite for launching a full-scale investigation. Accusing a senior DIA analyst of espionage was not something done lightly. Months passed. Eventually, in November 1996, Carmichael was authorized to interview Ana Montes directly. It was a gamble. The interview lasted 2 hours. Carmichael raised the concerns carefully, one by one. Montes responded without hesitation. Her explanations were calm, logical, and internally consistent. She said she left during the crisis because she was exhausted. Her access to classified material reflected professional diligence. Her opinions on Cuba were analytical, not ideological. She never raised her voice. She never appeared defensive. She never made a mistake. Carmichael left the room unsettled. Not because of what she said,
but because of how easily she said it. He could not point to a single lie, but he felt certain she was hiding something. It was not evidence, it was intuition, the kind that comes from years of studying deception. Years later, Ana Montes would admit that interview terrified her. She believed her espionage career might have ended that day. For a brief moment, she considered that she had been exposed. But nothing happened. Without corroboration, the case stalled. No surveillance was authorized. No monitoring was intensified. Montes returned to her desk. Her career continued to advance. 4 more years passed. She received awards. She gained influence. She became indispensable. The system had felt the crack. And then it sealed itself. What no one realized was that while the DIA suspicions had gone dormant, a completely different agency, working on a completely different case, was about to reopen the question from an unexpected angle. Not through human observation, but through mathematics. And in the next part of this story, we will see how a fragment of encrypted data recovered from an unrelated investigation would finally give shape to the unease that had haunted one man for years. Because the truth about Ana Montes was not discovered by looking at her. It was discovered by decoding someone else.
The breakthrough did not come from the Pentagon. It came from a prison cell in Florida. In 1998, U.S. authorities arrested a Cuban spy network, later known as the Cuban Five. The case itself was serious but familiar: illegal agents, covert communications, foreign handlers. What made it different was what came next. The National Security Agency began decrypting recovered communications. Months passed, then years. And buried inside the traffic was a reference that should not have existed. A code name: Agent S. The messages were cautious, fragmentary, and deliberately vague, but they carried implications that made analysts stop reading and start rereading. Agent S was not a field operative, not an exile, not an embassy contact. Agent S worked inside the United States government. High level, trusted, with access to identities of Cuban defectors, with the ability to query something called SAFE. To an outsider, SAFE sounded meaningless. To an intelligence professional, it was a red flare.
SAFE, Secure Analyst File Environment, was the Defense Intelligence Agency's internal classified messaging and document system. If Agent S had access to SAFE, then Agent S was inside the DIA. That single constraint collapsed the universe of suspects. Elena Valdez, an NSA counterintelligence analyst, recognized the gravity immediately. She briefed the FBI and expected rapid movement. Instead, she encountered silence, a misunderstanding, a closed file, bureaucratic inertia. So she did something unusual. She followed the lead herself. Valdez contacted the DIA directly and arranged a meeting with Chris Simmons, an analyst specializing in Cuban counterintelligence. She shared the NSA findings without formally notifying the FBI. It was a risky move, but she understood the stakes. Simmons needed only moments. SAFE. Senior position. Cuba-focused access. the pieces aligned too cleanly to ignore. Simmons contacted Scott Carmichael. Carmichael opened his old notebook. The 1996 interview. The unexplained unease. The analyst who fit too well. Ana Montes. For the first time, suspicion had structure. In May 2000, the FBI opened a formal investigation.
This time, it would not rely on instinct. It would rely on patience.
Surveillance began quietly. Agents watched Montes' apartment in Cleveland Park. They tracked her movements on weekends. They noted her habits, her routines, her deliberate avoidance of patterns. She used payphones. In an era when cell phones were common, this stood out. She visited locations that could function as signal sites. Nothing conclusive, nothing provable, but enough to justify the next step. The most dangerous step in any counterintelligence case, a covert entry. In October 2000, while Ana Montes traveled to Florida, an FBI team entered her apartment. They worked methodically, no disturbance, no trace. What they found changed everything. A shortwave radio, tuned to frequencies known to be used by Cuban intelligence. A laptop containing classified information that should never have left the DIA. Encrypted disks, deleted files, operational instructions, communication schedules. It was no longer a suspicion. It was confirmation.
Before leaving, the agents planted audio surveillance devices. They wanted more than a conviction. They wanted the network, the handlers, the full scope. For months, they listened. Montes remained careful. She did not panic. She did not change her pace. She continued her routine as if nothing had changed. But the FBI now understood something essential. They were not racing against exposure. They were racing against time. Because Ana Montes was still trusted, still cleared, still working on sensitive issues. And in September 2001, time ran out. On September 11th, hijacked aircraft struck the World Trade Center in the Pentagon. Within hours, the intelligence community mobilized. Task forces were assembled to support military operations against Afghanistan. Ana Montes was selected. She was about to receive briefings on Operation Enduring Freedom, war plans, troop deployments, operational timelines. If she gained access, that information could reach Havana within days. And from Havana, it could go anywhere. And Havana could trade it. American soldiers could die.
The FBI met the call. They would not wait for her to meet a handler. They would not build a bigger case. They would not risk another day. On September 21, 2001, Ana Montes was summoned to a conference room at Bolling Air Force Base. She walked in calmly. Inside were FBI agents. She was placed under arrest for conspiracy to commit espionage. She showed no emotion, no shock, no denial, no collapse. She requested a lawyer and said nothing. That same day, agents seized computers, encrypted media, foreign currency, and 5 passports issued by different countries. The passports revealed a travel pattern designed to evade detection. Routes through Europe, disguises, false identities. It had all been planned. Years in advance. Without error. In the aftermath, damage assessment teams began counting what had been lost.
They would never agree on a final number, but they would agree on this. Ana Montes had not simply stolen secrets, she had reshaped reality. And in the final part of this story, we will see what happens when an intelligence system finally confronts the scale of its own failure, and what Ana Montes said when asked whether she regretted any of it.
Because for her, the story did not end with arrest. It ended with justification. The arrest of Ana Montes did not bring closure, it brought reckoning. Within hours of her detention, senior officials across the intelligence community were briefed, quietly, carefully. The language was restrained, but the implications were catastrophic. One of the most trusted analysts inside the Defense Intelligence Agency had been working for a hostile intelligence service for 16 years. 16 years. That number alone forced a single question. What exactly had been lost? The FBI initiated a comprehensive damage assessment, later known internally as Project Bluestone. Teams from multiple agencies began reconstructing Ana Montes's career day by day, report by report, briefing by briefing.
Ha examined what she accessed, what she influenced, and what she might have transmitted, even when no direct evidence remained. What emerged was not a list, it was a collapse.
Montes had compromised virtually every significant U.S. intelligence operation related to Cuba. She revealed a highly classified reconnaissance satellite, allowing Havana to adjust its operational security and neutralize an expensive collection system. She disclosed the identities of hundreds of intelligence personnel, including undercover officers operating inside Cuba itself. She explained how U.S. signals intelligence intercepted Cuban communications, what frequencies were vulnerable,